You know, I never really wanted to do TYT response videos because I always thought it was low-hanging fruit. You were kind of nitpicking at them or whatnot. But then I saw this video and I realized that some of the things they say have to be countered because some of it's just uninformed nonsense. Being interested in economics, I've been following Venezuela for a while, so when they started talking about it, I just felt it needed to be talked about.
Venezuela is currently undergoing a devastating economic crisis, and as a result, individuals living in the country do not have access to affordable food. And so many people are losing an insane amount of weight in a very short period of time. Recently, there was a study done by the country's National Survey of Living Condition. 3 major universities in Venezuela get together to do this survey. And what they found was that, on average, people have lost 19 pounds in 1 year. According to the new results from an annual national survey, nearly 3/4 of respondents reported losing an average of 19 pounds between 2015 and 2016. Also, the portion of respondents who said they ate 2 or fewer meals increased threefold, climbing from 11.3% in 2015 to 32.5% in the past year. That's around 9.6 million people in a country of roughly 30 million, and they're eating at this rate.
Now, I know the article she's talking about. And yes, it talks about the suffering of the people of Venezuela. And there's nothing wrong here. But when they start to give their opinion, they get in trouble.
The economic situation there is a complete and utter disaster for various reasons. But the biggest reason is that they were solely dependent on their oil.
Now, you'd think some historical context would be needed here. Why were they so dependent on oil? Well, if you go back to the 70s, Venezuela was a very rich country and they did diversify. They used to be a bigger coffee producer than Colombia back then. They also did a lot of manufacturing. But through their government mismanagement, it drove out a lot of businesses with price controls and taking control of the industries themselves. They drove out more private businesses than people know. You don't really know since they nationalized the press. ABC News reported that they had gone from 14,000 private businesses in 1998 to only 9,000 in 2011. I mean, for God's sake, he drove Pepsi out, so they were even more dependent on oil.
And then as soon as the oil prices dropped, and that started back in 2014, I mean, they were screwed. They were heavily reliant and continue to be heavily reliant on imports. They don't produce anything in the country other than oil. And so they're importing everything. Inflation has gone through the roof.
Again, historical context matters.
Countries like Saudi Arabia, for instance, of course, their number one market or number one product is oil as well. But Saudi Arabia planned ahead. They didn't spend as much money as Venezuela did. Venezuela spent all its money on a lot of social programs, right?
But now, she just made a claim. Did she cite any facts or any sources? No. And why'd she use Saudi Arabia? There are other countries that are oil dependent. Let's talk about Norway, Finland, Sweden. They're oil dependent too. They spend a lot on social programs and they didn't go to the crapper. And here is a source. Saudi Arabia has universal health care. Venezuela does not. So where is she getting this data or this opinion from?
Hold on. Look, there's a little bit of propaganda in there too. So let me explain. So I'm not defending Hugo Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela, especially Maduro. I think the economy is a mess. They should have planned better, etc.
Oh, I can't wait for this stunning revelation that's about to be dropped on us.
But they do a lot of propaganda against Venezuela because they're socialist. And so, no, socialism's the wrong way to go. Don't spend money on your own citizens.
Is Cenk just going to defend socialists, or more importantly, just the socialist
now,
tag?
When you do spend money on your own citizens, you still have to be careful and figure out what is a good long-term strategy.
That's right.
But Saudi Arabia has a lot less people than Venezuela does. So, yeah, they didn't overspend, partly because the royalty keeps most of the money.
Yeah, and by the way,
Now, no facts were used in that statement, and it's kind of untrue. But we'll get to that when they touch on the real problem with Venezuela
let me be
later.
clear about something. I'm just bringing Saudi Arabia because some people might bring up that country and be like, well, if Saudi Arabia relies heavily on oil, then how come when oil prices went down, Saudi Arabia's economy didn't suffer as much? That's the only reason why I bring it up. I'm not saying Saudi Arabia has a good way of governing and a good economic situation that's fair and equal for everyone. No. I'm just saying that those are the two differences.
No, I understand.
Now, this is the problem with the Young Turks that a lot of people complain about. They don't use facts, they don't cite sources, and they talk about countries in kind of their stereotypical, what they're thought of.
I understand that, but let's continue to talk about the larger issues here. I have almost never seen an article about Venezuela in the West that didn't talk about, the socialism doesn't work. Socialism, though, the problem is socialism. Right?
Yes, Cenk, that's because their leaders constantly call themselves socialists.
right?
Yeah.
But no, that's not the real issue. The real issue is countries that have huge oil reserves, and by the way, Venezuela has the largest oil reserve in the world, which is amazing.
Wait, is Cenk going to defend socialism or is he just going to bash oil?
Never build effective economies. You think the Gulf countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Dubai, you name it, Qatar, whatever, no, they're all absolutely propped up by oil money, okay?
Yes, Cenk. Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Qatar are all propped up by oil money. They have other industries too. Besides, Dubai is a city, not a country. Also, Norway, Sweden, Denmark have substantial oil. Are they a problem economy too?
And even Russia. Russia's a disaster now because the oil prices have gone down. That's part of the reason that they're lashing out and doing the Trump thing and yada, yada, right? So that oil makes them rich and lazy.
Now here Cenk's actually getting to a point. He's just doing it all wrong.
And so they get overly dependent on
imports.
oil because it's so easy. It's so easy that you just drill, you get the money, and then you spend it, and a lot of times you overspend it.
Now this is actually a bigger point that doesn't involve oil. It's a point that when countries are flush with cash and tax revenues are good, like in the process of being in a bubble, they tend to overspend. It's not just related to oil.
So the problem isn't socialism. They don't have that in the Gulf at all.
Yes, they do.
The underlying problem is hooking your economy up to oil.
I know, Cenk.
Now, if you can get besides Cenk's blatant hatred for oil, the actual point he should be making and the way he should be phrasing it is do not hook your economy up to a single industry where it dominates so much where a downturn can absolutely devastate you. Oil became basically over 50, 70, 80% of Venezuela's economy because Hugo Chavez destroyed the rest. But this was the problem. So when there was a downturn, they had no recourse and there was no way to recover from it. This could mean any industry. A quick two examples. The South used to be dependent on cotton as one of their major economic drivers, but when India came online for the British Empire, it destroyed the southern economy. Also, there were a lot of whaling towns which made a lot of money on whaling oil, and then kerosene came around, crushing the whale industry.
Look, I'm not saying that it's, oh my God, the economy sucks only because of the fact that they spent the money on their own citizens. No, it's a three-pronged issue, right? It's the over-reliance on oil. They put all their eggs in that basket. The over-reliance on imports and not producing anything in their own country, right? And then also the fact that they weren't as responsible and they didn't plan ahead with their money. I'm not saying don't spend that money on social programs. Of course, I love social programs. I think that it's important, especially when it comes to things like wealth and income inequality. Equality.
It's so cute when Anna tries.
But I'm just saying that there are various issues here at play that led to rapid inflation and led to all these people being hungry.
Maybe the inflation has to do with the fact that their czar of Venezuela said inflation does not exist. He even went so far to say he didn't believe in it either.
I agree with that. So it drives me crazy that they bungle it so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And part of the reason they bungle it is because when they're high on oil, they think like, that's okay. Nothing's going to go wrong. We don't need a rainy day fund. We don't need to worry about the future. And we don't need to build other industry.
And here you're just exemplifying problems that people have with the media in general. The commentator acts like they know everything. You clearly don't know a lot about Venezuela, so you shouldn't act like you have an opinion and you know exactly what the issue is.
Look, so let me tell you about what a mess Venezuela is. To read you the last graphic here, the International Monetary Fund estimates that the country's inflation is expected to rise 1,660% this year and 2,880% next year. Jesus Christ. So yes, the government in Venezuela has absolutely made a mess of it, and there's corruption, okay?
Yeah.
And in that one little sentence right at the end, he hits the nail on the head with, and there's corruption. There's not some corruption. There's mass corruption in Venezuela. You can find tons of headlines about corruption going on in Venezuela. In fact, there are U.S. sanctions against government officials in Venezuela to prevent them from fleeing the country with the spoils they've got. Hugo Chavez's daughter is a billionaire because he's looted the treasury. He's looted the profits from them. This is the main issue with Venezuela. It's not because they did socialist policies. It's not because they became overly dependent on oil. It's the fact that their government looted the country. Now, granted, all those other things did play a role, but corrupt government can destroy any system of government and destroy the people. And if you had spent time getting to know what was going on in Venezuela, you would know this.
Now, at the same time, you take oil away from those Gulf countries and they will disappear into the desert. They have no other industry. It's just that there's very few people who live there, and the royalty, even when oil prices go down, are still billionaires. So there's the appearance of everything is fine. You stop they run out of oil reserves or gas reserves in those countries, they're going to be into the wind, man. There's going to be nothing left in those countries. They have no other industry. Why? Same problem as Venezuela. They hit the crack pipe and they hit the heroin too hard. They're hooked on it. Once you take it out, there's nothing left.
I'm not sure why this was included by him. It just seems to be his diatribe of why oil is evil. Oil sucks. I mean, people have been living in that part of the world for over 10,000 years. And there's countries like Israel and Jordan, which are doing, well, Israel's doing just fine. Jordan has its problems because of the Syrian migrant crisis, but they're there just fine. This is simply just a case where TYT is reporting on something that they don't know a lot about. Don't act like you're informed on the topic. That's why people hate this stuff. And you don't do any services to your audience which may not know the truth.